of October 14th to order. The supervisor is not able to be with us tonight, so I will be running the meeting in his absence. I was hoping to see our Director of Finance here, but I don't see him. Maybe he's running a bit late? Okay, good. Because three of these things on the agenda, I think we need him here for the discussion. So I'm going to go a little bit out of order, if that's okay with everybody, and move to the third discussion item of eligible facility requests for modification to telecommunication towers under the Middle Class Tax Relief and Job Creation Act of 2012. And I think, Josh, you might be the best person to help us with this discussion?
Yes. So this eligible facility request is a relatively new term to myself. And essentially, the reason I chose to bring this to the board's attention is because within the past 2 months or so, we've received about 4 of these eligible facility requests. And they really relate to existing telecommunication towers in town. So apparently under this act that was passed by Congress back in 2012, there is a provision that allows these telecommunication carriers to essentially apply to the municipality for modification of an existing tower. And if it meets certain criteria, essentially the town has a certain time period in order to approve or deny the request. Now, the current process in our town code for approval of these towers or modifications to them typically require a special use permit by the town board as well as site plan approval from the planning board. So essentially, our own town process takes longer than the time period in which we're put on notice. So essentially, we have 60 days to act on the application, and if we don't, if we can't get through our process or we neglect to make a decision, it's essentially a default approval. So there is some specific criteria that qualifies it as an eligible facility request. So does the modification increase the height of the tower by more than 10% or 20 feet? If the answer is no, so my understanding, it has to meet all of these criteria in order to fall under this eligible facility request. So now if they're proposing a major change to the footprint of the existing tower in excess of 10%, that is something that the town would have jurisdiction, and it would not become an eligible facility request. So as I mentioned, there must be some new technology because within the past few months, several phone carriers have approached us with these eligible facility requests. So I just want to make the board aware of what this is and what the potential implications are. I know we have an application to construct a new tower in town, but I just want everyone to be aware that once there's one in existence, there's federal law that basically trumps local zoning. And again, if it's anything substantially in excess of these criteria and these parameters, then it wouldn't be eligible for this default approval.
What are they asking for as far as their requests in the last few months that you've gotten?
So the majority of the requests have been to add additional antennas. So they're not really proposing any new expansion of the footprint of the area that they currently are located in. One of the ones is actually on the site of our wastewater treatment plant. They would like to install, I believe, up to 4 additional antennas than what's currently there.
They say why?
I can't recall the exact reason, but like I said, I think there's been some kind of technological breakthrough because we're seeing them for
All these
different
carriers are going from 4G to 5G, a lot of them across the country. So I don't know if that was what they're requesting the antennas for or not. Are they removing any existing antennas?
No.
Okay.
Another example is one on which I provided, I think, a copy to the board. This is the sewer site one, and basically they're looking to add 3 additional Samsung antennas. So
Yeah.
when you look at the calendar and you look at the process in our town code, we can't get through it all within
Right.
the 60-day window. So, I mean, the only reassuring part is, again, it has to meet these 7 criteria. So if they have to, if they're proposing to add like backup generators or new equipment cabinets on the ground,
Right.
that we would have something to say about that. But if they're simply looking to swap out or add antennas on the pole itself, there's this federal law that basically gives them the power to do it if we don't act in a certain amount of time.
So I was going to ask that question also when you talked about increasing the footprint. So generators, additional cabinets, which is something we heard about at the public hearing for the proposed tower. There was a concern that what's going to come in the future. Those things would increase the existing footprint.
Correct. That's my understanding, yes.
So are you suggesting that we somehow change what we do because we can't do it in the time frame that's laid out in this?
That might be something that the town board wants to consider if this trend is going to continue as technology advances. Yeah, that would be something that we could take a closer look at and maybe propose some changes to, not to substantially fast track it, because we don't want to do that necessarily, but yeah, potentially modifying it so that we would be able to bring it through our process prior to the 60-day time clock expiring.
I think we probably need to take a close look at that, because if we can't get through it in the 60 days, then it is essentially a done deal without us being able to go through the process.
Correct.
My other comment is that when I first saw this as something that was going to be on the agenda, I just find it completely bizarre that something like this is buried in the Middle Class Tax Relief and Job Creation Act of 2012.
Yeah.
That's not where I would have searched for this sort of legislation, but I guess that speaks to how the federal government does business.
Yes, this is just a small provision in a very lengthy bill.
Mm-hmm. Does anybody else have any questions or thoughts about this?
Oh,
I think we have to change it, in order to address this, we would have to change our procedures.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple options, and we can work internally to maybe come up with a couple different options that would shorten it and keep it within a 60-day period. It's just when you factor in the legal notices and the lead time for all of the public meetings that are currently required, it's just impossible to accomplish within that 60-day period.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I just wanted to make the board aware of this, as it's becoming a prevalent request we've been seeing.
What are the grounds if you could get it through in 60 days to deny it?
Well, if it exceeds more than 20 feet outside of the existing footprint, that would be a reason to deny it. If it involves the installation of more than the standard number of cabinets, and I'm not all that up to speed on what's contained in those cabinets, that would be grounds.
height,
Yeah, the height if they're
concealment.
correct. So essentially, you know, it allows for slight modifications. Again, any major reconfiguration or expansion of the footprint, that would make it not eligible for this process. So we would still have an opportunity to impose conditions and evaluate it against our code.
Is it possible you could just deny it and then go through the process?
Well, I would fear that I'd probably defer to Charlie on that, because
I think the key is going to be giving notice and the timeliness of notice. So, I agree with Mrs. Cataldi. This is astounding that this would be put into a law that's almost 10 years old and buried there, and not something that I'll bet most municipalities in the country are aware of, and yet it affects every single one.
right,
And it's mandatory.
correct.
Why don't Josh and I discuss this, because I think there's probably some things we can do.
Okay.
Certainly to expedite the process if we need
Yeah.
to do that, if there's ways of, I don't want to say getting around it, but ways of not necessarily approving out of hand every single application that comes in. You know. I'm sorry, do we have something pending right now, this particular matter?
We have about 3 of them right now
Okay.
that have come in the past month or 2.
And they're all citing this particular section?
Correct,
All right, so somebody found this thing and now they're passing it around and
yes,
seeking to exercise their
that is correct.
Congress-given rights. Okay.
Yeah, as I said, this was the first time I had heard of this, actually, and I spoke with one of the people at Crown Castle, and they kind of described, you know, their understanding, and they provided some material explaining the regulation and their rights under this law. So, just food for thought. And Charlie and I will.
Yeah, I think you and I will get together and discuss this sooner rather than later.
Okay.
Thank you both for that. I think that's probably the best next step to take, because we are seeing several of these coming to us, and as easy as it might seem to just deny it, I think that could lead to more problems down the road. So maybe we have to figure out, as you said, how we can adjust our schedule to meet this and be beneficial for the town.
That's the goal.
Josh, thanks for bringing it to our attention. I'm going to go back to the original agenda, and we'll go to discussion item number 1, the discussion of the 2022 fee schedule. And we all have a copy of it in our packet. We were sent a copy earlier this week as well to review. We have a lot of department heads here tonight, which is wonderful. Paul, do you want to kick this off, or how do you want to handle this?
For the fees?
Or do we want each department head who's got some information here? Or should we have each department head address it?
He hasn't really been involved.
Okay.
It was something that I forwarded to each of the
Yes.
department heads to implement those changes, and then give it,
So the department heads would be best to discuss this.
there's,
It looks like it starts out with a lot of fees that are generated through the Department of Public Works. Maybe Josh and Mary want to take a crack at it?
Sure. So yeah, the first page is primarily the building division fees. So what we did was we had some staff collect and analyze some neighboring towns' fee schedules, just to, you know, compare where we were at in comparison to their rates, just to make sure we're in line. So we also kind of clarified and recategorized some of our permits. So for example, on the second line down, accessory structure / garage, that is a new permit designation that I think provides more clarity when we're analyzing our permits and the fees that are coming in as a result. Before, we were just using a standard building permit, but we thought it'd be in our best interest to call that out. So the fee is consistent with new construction, and it's going from, let's see, it's 15 cents per square foot or a $50 minimum. We also adjusted our our main building permit fees for residential and commercial and industrial. Like I said, upon looking at other towns, we were approximately 10 cents per square foot lower than most every other municipality, so we are slightly increasing that. We are also adding a certificate of occupancy reinspection fee. So that, under that scenario, we're called out for a C of O inspection, and if they're not ready or they don't have all of the appliances in or the smoke detectors and everything needed for us to issue it, they get a reinspection. And there's been several instances lately where we've been called out to reinspect and they're still not at the point of being ready for C of O. So we're hoping that this new fee will help some of the builders and contractors better prepare for when they do call us out. And then in the event that they're calling us out multiple times, at least we're getting some additional revenue to cover that staff time.
Josh, can I jump in there?
Sure.
So when I started at the sewer department, there was a small reinspect fee, and I increased it to $200. Our visits reduced, and the builders got their stuff in gear, and they didn't use us anymore to come and camera their lines and tell them what they needed. So I think it's a great idea. Personally, I think it's low.
Really?
I really do.
And
What-
they have the punch list of what's needed to be completed before you go out for the certificate of occupancy, correct?
Correct.
They know.
But there's some builders that, you know,
Well, and I'm sure they're also all still dealing, like all of us are, with things that aren't being delivered on time and,
correct. Yeah, that's.
Well, in a
I'm
case
sure-
like that, they wouldn't schedule the inspection, right? You would
Shouldn't.
think.
One
Well,
would
they
think.
shouldn't.
I wouldn't.
no.
You'd be amazed.
Yeah.
We have dramatically reduced the amount of second visits we make on C of Os. We
I
ask them
believe
20
it.
questions, and now
Right.
that they know it's $200, they
Yeah.
get it right.
All right, well, we may consider upping that with this new information, but that is a new fee. We also called out a deck/porch as separate. Actually, that was combined with garages. It was a garage deck porch permit. We wanted to differentiate because we are seeing a lot of accessory structure applications coming in, and just for data tracking and record-keeping purposes, we thought it'd be smart to differentiate between the two. Same thing with sheds and fences. We separated it. It used to be one singular permit together. We've separated it and increased the fee. Basically, the fee remains the same, but we're actually going to be following up inspecting fences and sheds to make sure that they comply with the setback requirements. That's something we currently aren't doing, but will be doing. So we're adding that $30 inspection fee to cover the cost of that. So yeah, the garage porch deck permit has been removed and categorized as I just explained. We're moving letters of compliance from the building division to community development. I'm pretty much the sole person that when people refinance, they request a zoning letter of compliance and a survey map, and then I go back and research the historical approvals and provide a letter stating that what the property is legal for, when it received its approvals, etc. So we're keeping the fee the same, but we're just moving where it is in the fee schedule. Again, remodeling permit for commercial and industrial, that's going from 15 cents a square foot to 25 cents a square foot for commercial, and from 15 cents to 20 cents for residential. And again, that brings it more in line with neighboring municipalities. Next page, the shed permit again is standalone with an additional $30 inspection fee. Below you see community development. These are all existing fees that have just been relocated from one section to another. The fees themselves haven't changed. And then I think progressing along, do you want to go to engineering, or do you want me to continue with the couple other divisions?
Before you move on, I just want to say I like the direction you're headed in with the additional inspection after these things are completed, because time after time we see these coming back to us. Someone purchases their property and all of a sudden we discover that there's a fence that's been placed in the easement. It wasn't supposed to be built there 10 years ago. Nobody went out to check it, and now we're dealing with it. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to eliminate a lot of those inconsistencies.
That is the intent.
And I think you're moving in a good direction with this. I want to thank you for all your work on that. Sure, go full speed ahead on engineering.
So I'll take the engineering ones. The first one that I changed was the EPOD permit. So that's if you're doing work in an environmental protection overlay district. So if there's steep slopes or wooded lots. It was $50 an acre. I changed it to a $100 application fee and then $100 for the permit. I think in all of, and then the next ones are the excavation fill permits. I changed the thresholds for each level of permit, and then they all have application fees followed with a permit issuance fee, and it increases as you're increasing your fill amount. The thought there is there's quite a bit of homework that's done before the application comes to the town board. So it's receiving the application, talking to the resident, conducting a site visit, looking at existing mapping, and then coming up with a plan. Right now, many of these aren't done by engineers or surveyors, so it's a lot of communication with the resident to get a good understanding of what's happening, so that we feel comfortable issuing those permits. Then nothing was changed for the construction related fees, but I did add some new fees under development review. So the engineering department reviews a lot of things that come before the planning board or administrative reviews. So for minor subdivision review, there's a $50 fee. Residential site plan review, a $250 fee. And then commercial industrial site plan review, $750. These are actually pretty low compared to what some of the other local municipalities are, but with it being the first year that we're doing this, I didn't want to go too high, but it is kind of aimed to cover the costs that I'm doing when I'm reviewing things, as well as the other department heads at PRC meetings. We get about 10 people in a room. There's 4 or 5 department heads, so we're looking at these projects for 15 minutes to a half hour 3 times. So it's a lot of labor hours that go into it, with a lot of people that are getting benefits and salaries from the town. So just trying to buffer that cost when we're looking at these applications coming through. There's another fee that we added. It's a utility easement fee. So it's $50 an easement is the proposal. Every time that there's a subdivision with new easements, it goes to our GIS staff and they review that the description matches the meets and bounds on the map. And then it also gets reviewed many times by our attorney. So That's a fee that we are proposing for next year. For highway dedication, we just went through this process last week at the town board meeting, proposing to have a $150 application fee for if it's a temporary dedication, so that would be per season. It would be $150, and then $300 for permanent. The next thing that is new is a stop work order sign removal. So this is when someone in town becomes aware that there is work going on that shouldn't be, so we have to immediately react and determine if it is in fact something that shouldn't be happening, and then go post a sign and communicate with the property owner. So it's a fee to remove the sign, but it's also helping with the cost to put it there in the first place. The next couple were moved to community development, and then the last engineering one, waterfront development permit, that is a duplicate to, which one, Josh? Floodplain?
Yeah.
Floodplain development permit. They're essentially the same thing, but floodplain development permit is the more appropriate title for it, so we proposed removing the waterfront development permit.
Thank you, Mary. Again, I think you've taken a deep dive into all of these things and given them careful consideration, especially taking into consideration the time that is spent on all of these to make sure we have a good project. I don't think most people really realize what goes into a development.
Yes, there is a lot. There's a lot that happens behind the doors of the town
Yes,
and out in the field.
thank you.
Are we, have we been in the past one of the few towns that don't charge for a highway dedication application?
I didn't see it on every township that we pulled fees for, but it was on a couple. And I think it makes sense with the amount of effort in inspecting the final road top and then processing it and getting that information to the state to charge a fee for that service, so.
The next ones are under the fire marshal. The only new fee I see is a fire safety inspection at $75 per inspection. And then again, looking at the re-inspect fee, if items weren't completed, then that would be $25. And we may want to consider increasing that as well, according to Art's success with that in the past, but I will leave that for discussion with the engineering building departments.
Yeah, so I met with the fire marshal and deputy fire marshal, and we discussed, again, they pulled several municipalities' fee structures as it relates to fire and safety inspections. This is something we're not currently charging for at all right now, but as we look to implement a system or fee schedule for these types of inspections, it appeared that there's two ways that municipalities go about doing these types of inspections. There's one model where basically it's an annual operating permit that every business and every facility that requires these inspections, and again, depends on the type of facility, on the frequency of when we need to inspect it. But under this model, we would essentially every January mail out to all of the businesses that require these inspections an operating permit, which is essentially, they're putting on record with the town what their business is, what type of equipment they have, and then depending on the specific nature of their business, for example, if it's a gas station that has fire suppression equipment, there's like an a la carte fee added based on what type of inspections are needed based on the equipment that they have. So that's one model. It requires a lot of administrative background support, invoicing, sending renewal letters, things of that nature. The other model is pretty straightforward. We charge per inspection. So when we go out to a business, whether it's annually, semi-annually, biannually, we charge a per inspection fee.
And these are inspections that are required.
They are required periodic inspections under the New York State Fire and Building Code.
So the impetus to this, you know, from my understanding, was primarily Xerox, and that several years ago, after Xerox did not have their own fire department and did their own inspections, the town legally had to take that on, correct?
That is correct.
So I understand it's $75 per inspection, so that's like per business. So Xerox says how many buildings we have to inspect?
They have about 75 buildings.
So are you going to charge them per building, or you're going to charge Xerox the same $75 that you're going to charge a business in downtown,
No.
in the village?
It would be per building.
Beautiful.
Again, this
Thank you for that.
This
by
is
the way.
kind
I
of
just wanted
up.
to clarify.
Yeah, so we have two options here. The one that I included in the fee schedule for tonight's discussion is based on the per inspection model.
Yeah.
My personal opinion, as we implement this new fee, I tend to like that option better than the operating permit, because the operating permit plus the à la carte style fee will require a lot of legwork up front to inventory and get a good handle on what businesses have what equipment. And again, we don't really have, the fire marshal's office doesn't have any admin support at this time. So I'm more inclined to go with the fire safety inspection billing per inspection. That's just my preference, but I do think that whatever we do in regards to this, the fire marshal also covers the village of Webster.
Right.
So I don't know, maybe it's a legal question, how it would impact our intermunicipal agreement, or whether or not the village would also need to, buy into this, because it will affect village businesses as well.
That's a question for Charlie, I guess. I don't know. If we're doing the inspections, I would assume that we would have
I
jurisdiction.
don't know what the nature of the agreement is right now, I'd have to
Yeah.
look at that.
Well, you can get with Charlie later.
Yeah.
So the other thing, it'd be great if you could educate us as to, you also did an inventory of how many inspections we did 10 years ago compared to currently, and that there's a significant increase in the amount of inspections we've had to do, correct?
Yes, because all of the multifamily apartment buildings, the senior housing complexes, those all require additional routine inspections. And we've had a lot of them developed in the past 10
Right.
to 15 years.
So the increase in inspections has led to an increase in hours and
Sure.
manpower also, so.
Correct, and we're just trying to kind of offset
Yes.
the expense with the added effort that's needed.
Yeah, you did a lot of work on this, Josh. I appreciate the background work that you did, and I think there was something that definitely needed to be addressed, so I appreciate that. I know you spent a lot of time on that.
Thank you.
Is there anything that you want to go through in the planning?
No, we're not really changing anything
Okay.
under the planning category. We are increasing the fee for easement encroachment permits, also known as license agreements. We've been seeing what feels like an uptick in those types of applications.
More like an inundation.
Yeah, inundation would be a good word. So we're proposing to increase that from $50 to $100.
Okay.
And then just going down to ZBA for the zoning board, we don't get them very often, but appeals for interpretation. So an example of that would be the lettuce, formerly proposed lettuce farm, and their desire to have a clarification of the zoning code before the zoning board. So we're proposing to increase that fee. Like I said, it's not, it happens very rarely, but yeah, we're proposing to increase that fee from 100 to 300. And we're slightly adjusting the cost of a commercial variance. It might have been an oversight from last year. We're just keeping it in line with the costs of the planning board applications. So that's going from 195 to 220.
Thank you. Art Patron, our sewer superintendent, is here. Do you want to say anything about any of the sewer fees?
Yes, okay, I had two changes. I looked at the labor rates and the benefits costs that the town is paying. So our camera truck with crew was formerly at $200 an hour, increased that to $250 an hour. That is just to cover costs of the staff and equipment. In the event that we're called out after hours, we increased that to $300 to cover their overtime. And did the same with flush truck with staff, increased it from $250 to $300, and then a new fee of $350 if anything's approved. So those are, again, just covering our costs. The flush truck actually doesn't completely cover our costs, but I put in hours for usage hours, and doesn't include water and things like that, but that's
Sure.
fine.
Thank you. You know, it sounds like a lot of increased fees, but on the other hand, there's an awful lot of work that goes into all of these, and we're certainly not here to be running the town at a loss in donating services. We can't do that. We have to be reimbursed for the work that we do. So I think it's a step in the right direction on many of these, and with careful consideration from all of our department heads. Do we have any other questions? You're good?
Thank you.
Councilman Dean, you look like you want to say something.
I don't think I will.
Okay. And then we have, on a separate sheet, Chris Bilo is proposing some changes in the Webster Parks and Recreation Center and Lodge rates.
We have just a few minor changes. We are not proposing any fee changes to any of our room reservations at the facility or at any of our lodges, any of the 3 lodges. We are not proposing any changes. And that's really because of the way the system is based for reservations. It's a 365-day reservation process. So the people that are reserving right now are reserving up until October 14th of 2022. So that's why we're not installing any changes at this point. It is something that we are looking at, similar to what Josh has talked about. We've benchmarked a number of the different municipalities and the various lodges, including the county, just to kind of see where we are on that scale along with the services that are included. So we are going to be looking at some point to make some changes, but because of the way that the structure works for reservations right now, our 22 budget is based on the numbers that you have.
Are we competitive?
We are. We're a little bit on the higher side, truthfully.
Okay.
You know, when you look at lodges from lodge to lodge and what services are provided. So we do have we've had some internal discussions, and we'll continue to have those. And again, we're starting to, I'll say, develop some recommendations that probably early in 22 I'll bring to the town board and say, you know, these are some things that I think we need to consider.
Okay.
Really,
Is North Ponds Lodge still open?
it is still open. Although I don't know I think it's closed for the season now.
Yeah.
But we did rent it this season. Because of the condition of the lodge, we drastically reduced the fee just because of the type of programs or events that you could have there.
Right.
But it was rented this year, obviously, of the 3 lodges. It's the least rented by a long way. And we've made some modifications even to the rental procedures, so that renters understand that when they rent the lodge, I use North Ponds as an example, they're renting the lodge, they're not renting North Ponds. Or when they're renting the Arboretum, they're renting the Curry Building, they're not renting the entire facility. So we're trying to make that as clear as we can too in our process. The only change I will bring to your attention is in regards to field fees. We slightly increased our resident and non-resident field fee usage, but what we did is we created a third category for our youth sports council members. So any of the youth organizations that belong to the Youth Sports Council, so your WAA baseball or your Warthogs or any of those organizations that belong, their rate will stay the same. So they stay at the, what I'll say, the reduced rate. It's just sort of a benefit of them of belonging to that organization, which obviously is a viable organization within the community. And in all honesty, the amount of usage that we have on those fields for rentals is pretty minimal because of the number of programs that we run internally. It's usually used on weekends for tournaments. That's about the extent of what we get for rentals. Although that is significant, but that's generally where we get most of our field fee or our field rentals. And that's it.
Thank you. So I think we've gone a little bit over on the discussion on the proposed fee schedule, but there was a lot to go through there, and I want to thank all of you for explaining it very thoroughly. The next item on the agenda is discussion on the impact of the town offering the Cold War veteran exemption option. And I will say up front that this one's on me, if you're looking for someone to point the finger and blame. But a while ago, I asked Donna Komar, our assessor, exactly what we were doing in the town for veterans exemptions, because I had heard we weren't, I didn't really know where that stood. And she came back with a very detailed explanation for me. I'm not sure if you've all had a chance to review the email thread, because that's really where the information is. It's gone back and forth between Donna, myself, Supervisor Flaherty, Paul Adams got involved in the discussion on just what financial impact that would have on our tax rate. But Donna, do you want to kick off an explanation of what we do currently and
Can you hear
what
me?
we're talking about?
Hear me all right?
I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, so presently the town of Webster, I am a town assessor, but the assessment role administers the exemptions over various taxing jurisdictions. So I'm saying that the town offers, by your decisions, we have a exemption for our eligible funds, which is our World War II veterans, basically. And then back in the 80s, you authorized the alternative veterans exemption. And so what that means is that there's no more eligible funds exemptions coming onto the assessment roll for veterans, but we have this new alternative veterans exemption. Fast forward to the, I don't know, 2008 or 9 or something, there's a new veterans exemption, which was available for us to offer, and the town at that point, the board in place at that point, opted not to take advantage of it. It was not a mandated exemption, and you bypassed the opportunity at that date. And that is something called a Cold War veterans exemption. Now, what's the difference between all the programs? So if someone comes to us applying now, we're honoring the old World War II veterans. If they move from one property to another, we'll continue to honor that within the municipality. But if they move to another municipality where alternative veterans exemptions is offered, we cannot sign them up again for that. They have to take the alternative because that's the new standard. The alternative veterans exemption that you currently offer is for people who have served during a period of war. So first, they must be honorably discharged. They must have served in the active military, not in the reserves, and they need to have served during a period of war. So if I just stop the explanation there, not to get bogged down into details, the additional program that was recently offered about 2009 is for Cold War veterans. So those are people who have served in our active military, been honorably discharged, but never served during a period of war. They served their time totally in between the federally declared periods of war. Does that make sense? There's less of them right now because we have an ongoing war for now more than 2 decades, and most of the applications we're receiving are alternative veterans exemptions. So the ongoing war in the Middle East, I don't have an end date for that yet, is we are looking at people who are signing up for the alternative veterans exemption. So back when initially the exemption was being offered, the county did opt in. You had to opt in and say, yes, we want to extend this additional benefit to our community. And Monroe County has opted into that. So we're already taking these applications, and we already have a good number of applications that are on our assessment roll. They're only approved, though, to receive that benefit against the county tax bill. There's 151 applications on the last final assessment roll. It amounts to approximately just under $900,000 of assessment that is not being taxed. That's the benefit that goes untaxed to those individuals. As you know, exemptions are a zero-sum game, so that just means that that comes off of our taxable value when you are doing the math to declare the tax rate. But it doesn't affect your tax budget rate because we're not offering it at the town level. So the question is, do we offer veterans exemptions? Do we not offer veterans exemptions? The answer is yes and no. We offer the alternative veterans exemption for town purposes. We do not offer presently the Cold War veterans exemption. The benefit of the hindsight is you now know how that would shift your tax liability from one individual to another, away from these 151 individuals who are qualified now and any new applications, toward the general population. Because you're not going to lose money when we offer exemptions. It just changes your math and recalculates your tax rate. It just shifts it from one group of people to another group of people when you have an exemption of any kind. So I'll stop there and see if you have any questions.
Very well explained, thank you.
Okay.
What's the cost?
And that's the next part of the discussion.
So the cost, there is no cost to the town, but the shift in the tax rate, I asked our finance director.
What does the shift in the tax rate amount to?
Less than
So
a penny for these 151.
Tax rate, a very small fraction.
So it's less than 1 cent.
Less than 1 cent.
Way less.
1 cent per thousand?
Less than.
Less than.
Way less than 1 cent per thousand.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry, I don't have the exact number. I think the exemption number changed anyway, so
Yeah.
I think the
So
exemption number is slightly higher than what we thought it was
I
originally.
think what I have on here is that it was 1/10 of 1 cent.
0.0014,
Yes.
according to Paul's email earlier. And in fairness, we were talking casually at that point, and now we're talking specifically, just full disclosure to you, we were just looking at the full benefit of that particular line item, if you will, that is the allowing of the exemption. So here's where we start to get into the details in the weeds just a little. I'll try not to go too deep in. In addition, any veteran who was injured during their service to our country is eligible for additional benefits on top of that basic benefit, and it's called a service-connected disability exemption. So we were not factoring that in. We were just looking at a rounded up number of 900,000 in assessment that was going untaxed for these people. There is an additional 216,000 that's not being taxed as these additional benefits on top. But if 900,000 didn't move the button on the radar, I don't think the other 200,000 is going to move it much further, that you're not going to notice any difference. But I just wanted to make you aware in case somebody's checking our math later. There's 2 parts to that, and we calculated one part as the bigger part as under 1 cent.
The service disability,
Service-connected disability. It's based on the rating. So if a serviceman is 50% disabled according to the United States Veterans Affairs, then they would get half of that rating, an additional 25% up to the maximum that you would allow in your local law as a benefit, as a reduced tax bill for them on the town purposes.
Would this be all our Purple Heart recipients?
It's not about Purple Heart. These are making a distinction as to whether you served during a period of war or during a Cold War time.
No, I was talking about the
Injured.
the disability.
So sometimes people are injured during boot camp. That's a service-connected disability. You can be injured during practice runs for something. That would be service-connected disability.
Okay.
Okay? And so it depends on the nature of that disability. Thankfully, our office doesn't have to determine that. We just get paperwork from the Veterans Affairs Office as part of their application, which gives a declaration of a percentage that they are disabled. We administer an additional exemption to those folks up to 50% off of that, up to a certain limit. So the next part of the weeds we get to visit is the limits. There's varying limits that you would be able to approve. So the purpose of my visit with you here today is to give you these details. There is an option for this town to offer an additional benefit. You have the benefit of hindsight to know how that would shift your tax dollars among your community constituents. We would be offering that if you were to allow it to a certain section of our veteran community. It's a lesser benefit than the other two programs, so there's not a large cost to it. And I forget where I was going with that. There's certain things that you have to opt in. So in an outline, you would opt into offering the program to begin with. Once you decide you wish to offer it, then there's things that are defined in the law. You can't just decide what you want to do. You can't offer 12% or 5%. You have to choose between 10 or 15% benefit. Monroe County has chosen the 10% option. So you have two options to choose from, a 10% benefit or a 15% benefit. And then you have to decide what the level of those benefits would be. So if you can take the basic minimum, you can make a reduced minimum, you can make it an increased maximum. So one of the handouts that I gave you is actually the instructions for the application, which all the veterans who would be applying would be using. There's a great big form number in the right-hand corner it starts with an RP, and there's a state of New York symbol on the top left corner in the heading. It says instructions for Form RP 458-B. Off on the right-hand side there's a couple of charts. I'd ask you to ignore the bottom chart because that's for cities of 1 million or more population. That's not us. So those are the different levels that you could offer, and you would opt in. So you're going to opt into the exemption, then you opt into the 10% or the 15%, and then you choose which of those levels you wish to offer. You do not have the option of attaching the disability portion to it. It just comes along with. So if you're looking at the 10% option, for example, under the basic maximums, $8,000 is the 10% option ceiling. We'll give you 10% off of your assessment, but no more than $8,000 equalized by the latest state equalization rate. All right? And if you offer that level, then if you read across the page, the disability that's associated with that is a maximum of $40,000, also equalized by the latest state equalization rate. So these are presented in full value terms in the law, and we have to equalize them to our local municipal standards.
Donna, is 8,000 the amount of the exemption, or is that what's taken off
That's a ceiling.
of the actual dollar amount?
Yes, it's a ceiling value. Okay, so in Webster, that would need to be equalized, first of all, so no one would see 8,000 because we're not assessed at 100%. The 8,000 presented in the law is assuming 100%, and you would apply your local rate of assessment to that number. So it would be 10% of the veteran's primary residence. They have to meet other criteria. I'm really not trying to get too far into the weeds. They would make an application to us.
Up to $8,000.
Yep. So the $8,000, they would not see that in Webster because we're not at 100%.
Okay.
But that would be a representation of the ceiling. So for math example, if someone had a home that would reach the ceiling, right? The ceiling this year would be $6,080, which would be using last year's equalization rate of 76% of that $8,000. They don't have 100% assessment, so they don't get 100% of the benefit ceiling. You'll take 10% of that assessment, but no more than, if 8,000 is your limit, then 6,080 is the same level as our assessment. Does that answer your
Are we a
question?
high appreciation municipality?
We are not. That's population of 1 million or more.
Oh,
So
okay.
ignore the lower box.
All right.
Then there's one more local option within all of these options. And if you were seriously considering it, I would strongly encourage you to take this last option, which is, when the law was originally created, there was a 10-year limit. And I used to teach the class, haven't taught since COVID started, but I used to teach the class on veterans exemptions. And I would get toward the end, and people would think I was funny when I would say, now we have to learn how to count to 10, because only the state of New York could write a law that tells you how to count to 10 that has actually 3 different criteria, some people of which would actually get a full 10 years, other people would not, because they didn't tie it to when you applied, they tied it to the date of the local law and whether or not you owned your property at that time or you purchased it later. That's about as far deep as I want to get into that, but there's 3 ways to count to 10. And the county has since removed that. You can take an option to waive a 10-year limit. I strongly encourage that, because it's just way too confusing. And to convert that from another municipality, say someone was in another municipality, purchased a property here, we are offering this exemption, and the municipality they come from only offered a 10-year window on that. They come here, they would get the balance of their 10 years. And in order for the assessor to know how to administer that, I need to know the date of their local law, when they purchased the home and when they actually applied, and how long they had it before I could calculate the balance of 10. It's really not the kindergarten counting to 10. I think what they were trying to do is make sure no one went past 10, but they forgot to look at it from the other side to see everybody could get a whole 10. And it's just too confusing and too burdensome, and the county's already removed it, so I would recommend that you match them on that respect and just make it a permanent exemption. Don't limit it to 10 years.
And that would accomplish the spirit of the exemption.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Only New York State would put that 10 years in there. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
I have a lot of fun. I have a flow chart. I'll just give it to you for visual effect. This is how you count to 10 on this exemption. It was a fun handout. We snickered a lot about people in Albany not knowing how to count to 10 in the class.
So I think we've shown that it has a negligible effect on everyone else's tax rate in town. Personally, I think it's something that the town, that we should do to honor our veterans. And we'll obviously have to move this to a board meeting where we discuss it and take a resolution on it if everyone else in the board feels that that's the direction we want to go.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would agree. But the other thing, Don, I want you to touch on is that this wouldn't take effect immediately.
Correct. Yes.
So maybe you want to touch on that a little bit?
Sure. The assessment roll is an annual process, so it's published once a year, and there is a deadline that dictates what can and cannot be included on that assessment roll. In January, the tax receiver is going to send out some tax bills with the town taxes on it, and everything that would be eligible to be presented on that bill has already been locked down. So you have plenty of time to make this decision, and it cannot affect that January bill is what I'm trying to say. So you have from now until March 1st to hold your public hearing, get the public's input, and you still will not eliminate anybody's first opportunity, because there is no way, as I stand here today, that if you approve this today, which you can't do because there's a process, right, it still could not appear on this January bill that is scheduled because it was not in effect by the deadline for that assessment roll.
So it'd be next year.
It would be next year. So as long as you make a decision before March 1, the first opportunity for it to appear on the assessment roll would be January of 2023. But I do encourage you to act swiftly, because if you wait too long, no one will know that we're offering it, and we won't have any new applications come in. So if you work along, we have the opportunity then to say to these people that the town is now offering that, and perhaps we would get some new people interested. If you get it too close to March 1, they don't have that opportunity to make the application, because that's the same deadline as the applications would be due in our office. So you have plenty of time, but don't wait too long. And I
think
just
we're
want to
gonna
make it
move.
clear through the process that
We're not gonna,
yeah, the first opportunity
gonna
still
delay
is
this.
January 2023, only if they apply by March 1st of 2022.
Thank you. Yeah,
you.
I have no desire to delay this either. I think it's just something that we need to do.
It's overdue.
Yes.
Yes.
I would agree.
Well, you have the benefit of now knowing that it's a minimal impact to the other taxpayers. I think when it first came out, there was this uncertainty of not knowing how many there are in our community. The county, having gone before you, has shown you the way and shown you the impact, and I would agree. I'd be
Okay,
very
well,
happy
and I
to
wanna-
take the applications.
I want to thank you for your very complete explanation, thorough explanation. And Paul, thank you for confirming some math on that. Yeah, we'll move it forward.
Great.
Thanks
Thank
very
you.
much.
Yep.
And we are running over. Last but not least, we have a discussion with representative from Enterprise Fleet Management in regard to leasing vehicles. Sorry to keep you so long.
Totally
Yeah.
appreciate you having me. Did everyone get a chance to get the synopsis printed out? I did bring some extras.
yeah.
Yes, we have it.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that historically, the town has purchased our passenger vehicles and our pickup trucks outright, and in some cases, we've held them for very long periods of time. We don't put a lot of miles on them for the most part, so I guess that's the reason we've held them so long. But there are quite a few that are getting up there in years, so I think, Mary, you came across Enterprise? Were you the initial contact? Pat? Oh, it's Pat. Pat Stevens, our highway superintendent, came upon Enterprise, so we've had a number of meetings with Connor Kimball here over the past couple of months to consider leasing versus buying, so he's here to explain.
Again, appreciate you all having me. Just to give a quick background, we'll walk through the synopsis and we'll go more into the details of the analysis I put together, given the information I've gotten from your department heads. And then feel free to interrupt me at any point if you have any questions. But how the conversation started was taking a look at your 4 departments of 37 vehicles. The current situation that we addressed was the town of Webster looking for a way to lower their average age of their fleet, reduce your operational costs, and then improve safety and increase your efficiencies. Right now, about 38% of your fleet is over 10 years old, and your holding vehicle is about 12.3 years, so over 12-year-old. And older vehicles, as we all know, have higher fuel costs. You run into higher preventative and non-preventative maintenance costs, and they tend to be more unreliable and unsafe. So the solution is working through our program, Enterprise Fleet Management. Doing so, we utilize an open-end equity lease. For those who aren't familiar with that term, it's kind of a hybrid between a finance and a lease. You take advantage of paying for the useful life of the vehicle, but you still retain all the equity of that vehicle upon the sale. We replace aged vehicles in a shorter term, which allows you to operate newer and safer models. It increases your fuel efficiency, and it prevents you from running into high maintenance costs throughout the life of that vehicle. We also create a proactive replacement plan for you. So we take a look at all of your vehicles, the mileage patterns, the vehicles that you're actually operating, and how they're used, and then create a 10-year plan, which we'll review later. So you can very proactively plan, and then they're also flexible in these terms. Just to give an idea, again, further into the open-end equity lease, I know people hear lease and, it makes you think of mileage penalties and what can be associated with a dealership lease. The great part is there is no early termination penalties. There's no mileage penalties if you go over or below what we structured the lease at originally. And then again, as far as the equity, you're not just turning these vehicles in and we sell them. Everything of that vehicle, the equity, is given back to the town and utilized how you see fit. There's an option to roll that into new lease payments, or you can take that as a check. We also have, as far as the damage to the vehicles, there's no issues upon turn-in. It just affects the residual value of that as it would for your normal vehicle. So there's no difference from an insurance standpoint.
Just about to ask that question.
Yep. We work through, so many of the municipalities work with 67 government entities and municipalities in just upstate New York. So when it comes to self-insurance, if you have your own policies, that will pass right over to our program as well. So upon the findings, after taking a look at your fleet, getting the data provided from your department heads, I put together an analysis of what we would expect from replacement. And from a 10-year implementation period, we can provide the town with $856,560 of savings. We can reduce your holding period from 12 years to 5 years. And we can also provide the technology and economies of scale that we have at Enterprise, operating over 2 million vehicles nationwide, to increase your visibility, your tracking, and ultimately reduce the administrative burden that your department heads are dealing with right now. We do have plenty of client testimonials that I can share prior. We do have one from the Superintendent of Highways from St. Lawrence County, Don Chambers, who talks about the efficiencies and the cost savings. So the results, again, we're working with over 67 local government entities that we can piggyback off of through the awarding of an RFP through Sourcewell. So that can be added at any point. If we can flip through to the second page, this just gives an idea of the solutions and the options that we provide through our program. Now, this is à la carte, so these are not all mandatory. These are items that you can choose to or not to use through our program. We will acquire all vehicles. The great part of that program is we use your buying power as a government entity, so you all will buy well. We use our economies of scale and our ability to sell vehicles to really drive down that cost of ownership. So any type of incentives that you would get from being a government entity, we apply those and buy directly through the factory. So again, that prevents you from buying marked up vehicles coming out of a dealership. We are financing credit lines. We are our own bank. So EFM Holdings is our own bank. We keep the interest rates at 350 basis points above the 3-year T-bill. So very low interest rates they carry over, and we'll hold that throughout the lease of that vehicle. We offer fuel programs through Right Express. We have maintenance programs that help you budget the entire maintenance cost for the vehicle's lifetime once ordered through us. We sell all vehicles for you, so both current owned vehicles and then vehicles that we put on a lease program. That is a huge component of how we're able to drive down that cost of ownership. We can facilitate all of the aftermarket for your vehicles, so in each department, especially highway, and it has some serious aftermarket that goes on those vehicles. We work with all the vendors that you prefer to use. We can capitalize that in the lease, and it significantly increases cash flow to the town. We handle all administrative portions of the vehicle, so we license it, we title it, we register the vehicles for you. We do hold title to the vehicles, which allows for the flexibility of our lease program. So you retain all rights to the vehicle, but we hold the title, so if there's any changes in the market, so right now what we're doing with a lot of government clients, because of the industry changes, vehicles are being sold for the highest level we've ever seen. Markups from dealership lots are on average $4,200, some are far higher. So what we're able to do is, let's say the market tells us, we run analysis and we say, let's sell now. No matter what you're structured on, you have the ability to take advantage of that, and all proceeds go back to the town of Webster. We also provide insurance and telematics options as well if those were desired. Before moving on, does anyone have any questions about the program thus far? No. Below is just a list of references and how we were awarded for best value from Sourcewell from an RFP that carries through 2023. These are some local government entities that we work with. Specifically in Rochester, we work with the town and village of East Rochester, town of Gates, Ontario County, and Genesee County that have been on our program for years now. In addition to just the cost savings, we also provide some value just from operating these newer, nicer vehicles for shorter periods of time. Safety is a huge component, and as technology progresses through newer model years, there are new safety components that anything over 10 years older are going to be severely outdated and lacking the basic safety equipment and technology that are coming out year after year. So that'll help from a liability standpoint as well. The next slide just gives more detail of the open and equity lease and how it's structured. So again, it's a separate line of credit for all the vehicles that optimize your cash flow, so you're only paying for the useful life of that vehicle and retaining all rights to the equity. There's unlimited mileage, and there's no penalties upon return. Any type of wear and tear is not penalized at all. You handle that as you would with your normal vehicles. There's flexibility of terms from extensions and shortening the terms. And then again, as I said before, you're retaining all rights to equity. The benefits of us holding the title is the administrative piece. So again, we can handle all the license, title, registration, working with the DMV to make sure plates are coming in. All of that is removed off of your plate to simplify the process and reduce that administrative burden. The next piece is a fleet profile of the 37 vehicles that you're operating on those 4 departments. So this is Parks and Rec, Highway, Sewer, and the Town Hall vehicles. This gives a breakdown of the type of vehicles you're operating, the average age of those vehicles, and then the average annual mileage. Then to the right, is a fleet replacement schedule. Based on what you're operating, the age of these vehicles, we took the best route of implementation to provide the ultimate cost savings, and years 1 through 5 would be the implementation of that. So we recommend replacing vehicles in 2022 would be 15, 5 in 2023, 6 in 2024, 6 in 2025, and 5 in 2026. The replacement criteria is on the top right there. It gives an idea of replacing the oldest vehicles first and with the highest odometer ratings, and then replacing the newer, lower odometers as we implement the program. A key piece of the year 1 replacement is there's 14 vehicles over 10 years of age. Again, that becomes a safety issue and it becomes an operational expense issue, and those are the ones we would address first. And that brings us into the analysis at the end. So how this all comes together. We'll show the 5-year implementation, and then we'll show the results of the analysis after the 10-year. Based off the data provided from your department heads, we came to data averages that we, again, operating from our 2 million vehicles and taking the data capture we have from our different government clients, we did use averages for the maintenance costs. So that is $145 per vehicle per month, which is where you will see the maintenance cost on the yellow line there. Our average mileage is about 6,900. Again, as most government entities, it's quite low as you stay in the proximity. The proposal would be keeping the same size fleet, shortening your cycle from 12.3 to 4.7, so right around a 5-year proposed cycle period. Your proposed maintenance through using our maintenance programs would reduce that from $145 per vehicle per month to $37.34. And the price per gallon is just what you would be operating from a government through the tax exempt pumps that you would have. So line 1 represents what your budget looks like now based on the data provided. Again, we took into account aftermarket and the vehicles that you're operating. So based on the hold and the information provided, your annual needs are about 3 per year. You have 0 leased. Your purchase budget based on those vehicles is $102,000. Obviously, it's a 0 on the lease column. No equity owned or leased at that point because it's showing your current budget. The maintenance of $64,380 is derived from the 37 vehicles times the 145 times the 12 months. The fuel cost is based off the 275 times the average miles per gallon of your vehicles you're operating at 10 miles per gallon. So your fleet budget, encompassing all of your exterior cost as well as the purchase budget, is about $237,000. The next line, where it shows 22, is year 1 of the implementation. So our recommended replacements would be 15. You'd then own 22 vehicles. You'd have 15 on lease. The lease budget for those vehicles of replacement would be $104,000. The equity owned, so those will be the vehicles that we're selling that you own for those replacement. A very conservative look at the equity that you're holding with those vehicles is $106,000. The new proposed maintenance cost is about $45,000. This significant drop in that is, again, you're operating newer, nicer vehicles, and you're on a budgeted program in which we're able to outsource that for you, which I can go in further detail once we go through the numbers here. Your fuel costs will decrease due to less fuel degradation from older vehicles. So your year 1 fleet budget would be $108,000, providing a net cash savings of $129,000 in year 1. That will progress through. I want to jump to line 2 for 2026. That will be the last year of implementation. So it would be 5 years of implementation. It shows the 10-year total savings. In year 2026, you'd be replacing the last 6 vehicles of those 37. Your total lease charge and budgeted lease charge for that would be $275,000. So that would be a structured lease payment. Once you're on that system, it's repeatable and it's budgetable. Now what you'll see is in the equity owned line, that's the sale of those final 6 vehicles. The line next to it is the equity from selling leased vehicles. You're selling newer, nicer vehicles, lower mileage. Using our system, there's an additional $222,000 of equity coming back to the town. So the maintenance costs are now budgeted using that the maintenance program. You're looking at $16,000 from an annual maintenance cost. You're looking at your fuel budget, which is now set with the newer, nicer vehicles at $56,000. Your fleet budget actually has a gain of $35,000, so your net cash savings is close to $300,000 just in that final year. We do run into times with different government entities when I've worked with others before. Sometimes there is a year in that 10-year implementation where it's actually higher. In your case, because of the vehicles you're operating, because of your mileage patterns, you do not run into that problem. So you are looking at a net cash positive position on every year of implementation, resulting in that 10-year savings of about $856,000. The box to the bottom left gives you an idea of where I'm coming up with these equity numbers. So it'll walk through the amount of vehicles upon replacement, the average cost of the actual average sale cost of those vehicles. Now it'll vary, from a specific level, but those are the averages upon each. And these are very conservative as well. Again, given your mileage patterns and where the market is, there's a lot of opportunity for the equity you're holding. I know that was a lot. Is there any questions that you guys may have? Maybe further details of the program?
You do police cars?
Yeah, I was just
Absolutely. We
looking at
work
the
with
list.
a lot of,
Why was the police department not included?
Yeah, they're not even in here.
Yeah, but why though?
That'd be in addition to.
and we work with Tom from Gerber too, who does all your upfit. So I know him very well, and the goal was to get them involved as well. But I met Pat first and Mary, so that was initiation of that. But the police department can easily be included. And I know
We did extend the.
they did.
What's that?
They thought with the outfitting of the cars, it would be advantageous, was their initial reaction.
And they require, well, and obviously, they require a specific,
We work with
Wow.
many, so County of Genesee, we work with City of Buffalo, we work with Erie County, Town of Gates. I don't think we work with their police department, but we have a handful. I personally worked with Village of Watkins Glen, Village of Canton, City of Ogdensburg. So all of these municipalities are using us for their police department as well.
Well, it's something to look into. I can understand there's difficulties. You can't compare these to the others because, for one thing, the mileage is much, much more.
And they beat them up, yeah.
They're 35,000 miles a year.
Right. So it'd be shorter terms typically, but
Right,
again,
at most 4 years, usually three to 4 years.
you're spot on. Yep. But that can be extended if they see that of benefit, but it can be done. So a holistic level is the best way for us to approach it. And I know I had discussions with Mary and Paul about how we can break it down from a department level as well. So we will look at the fleet from a holistic view, but we can break it down in separate budgets, and I'm working on a menu pricing for them now. The way we came up with our numbers is we used 2021 replacements of the exact models that they're operating. We used 3% inflation, which is the 20-year running standard of the inflation we're looking in the car industry. And then I put the estimated aftermarket for each vehicle. So from our estimations, we're very confident that it's very close. Right now, the menu pricing is kind of a moving target because the industry right now, the second I make a vehicle quote, they're cutting them off for order. So I want to make it as accurate as possible for vehicles that can be acted on, assuming this would be something you'd like to move forward with.
What's your current interest rate?
Right now, I think, that was a private company. So it's 350 basis points above the 3-year T-bill. It was right around 4.3 that was private though, so don't quote me there, but yours would be lower because your price plan is through
Okay.
Sourcewell, so you get a lower interest rate as well.
Yeah, what's interesting is that they hold the title to the vehicles, so this is just an operating lease, and yet we're still provided with the equity when they sell the leased vehicles, when they start selling those off in 5 or 6 years. Very unusual. So I asked him, well, how are you really making money? But he said they make a very small fraction on each vehicle. He said you have a huge buying power, you buy 15% of all vehicles.
About 1 in
Come
every
off them.
16 vehicles off an assembly line is an enterprise vehicle in some fashion, whether it's our rental department or it's us through our clients. But yeah, so it's our economies of scale paired with your government buying power is really why this works. You guys can buy vehicles cheaper than anyone else. We sell better than anyone else. Using that combination is why you see so much savings. 2008 is when that crash happened, and a lot of people were taught to buy and hold those vehicles, drive them till they're down. We recently acquired many of these government partners in the last 5 years because it's determined it works, and that's not necessarily the best way to run your vehicles. And our model works very, very well, almost hand in hand with your ability to buy in the low mileage patterns, so we take advantage of that equity, and you guys have newer, nicer vehicles to operate.
So over the first 5 years, we could either sell the current vehicles at auction like we traditionally have done, or I think we can assign them to Enterprise and they would actually sell them for us, I think also at auction probably, right?
Well, that's the big component as to
Yeah.
why we have higher returns. So we sell about 10% above Black Book CVI, which is the wholesale market standard, which you're used to hearing Kelly Blue Book. We go direct back to dealer because of our infrastructure and the relationships we have across the country. We go right back to dealer and get a higher return for them. We have a 700-man remarketing team, and all they do is sell our rental vehicles and our Enterprise customer vehicles. They're graded on disposition, meaning the time in which it takes them to sell it, and the return on those. So one, it takes that off of your plate, and two, the returns are as high as you can probably get anywhere else. So that provides a high level of return, and it's consistent as well.
Yeah, I took a look at the average sales price for the 37 vehicles that we would be leasing initially over the first 5 years, and it came out to about $16,000, which struck me as high, but even if it was half of that, we would still cover all the costs of the lease. So there's plenty of cushion.
Absolutely.
If you're confident that came out to like $626,000 for the 37 vehicles, which strikes me as high, but
Those were
even if it was only $300,000, I think we'd be still
Absolutely.
covering.
And those were conservative from our fleet strategy manager, that's his sole job. And the last thing we want to do is start a partnership, give you estimations, and then shoot low. So we're going to be conservative on purpose with that. And the whole basis of this is a template, so to show you how it can be rolled out. You ultimately have the decision-making power for all of it, right? So our job is to provide you with the data. So we're going to meet with you guys 2 to 3 times a year. You'll have myself, you'll have a client strategy manager, you will have a fleet count coordinator, which is like your day-to-day contact. We will run the reports for you. We will make sure that we're monitoring what's going on in the industry, and then we will present that to you. You ultimately make the decision. Now, this is what we would do, this exact template, if it was our fleet. But I know things change, things happen. If there's certain vehicles that you want to replace, it's ultimately your decision. And this shows a template of it's pretty much going to hold at that level of savings, no matter how you crack it, even if it's a little high, a little low. That's still a significant number that would be going back to the town.
Yeah, I took a look at just the operating lease cost for the first 5 years, and that came out to $275,100 versus what they're saying we could sell the 37 vehicles for. They think we can sell them for $626,000. Based on that, we're $250,000 ahead. That's the number I think might be high, but even like I say, if it was only half of that, we'd be budget neutral.
Right.
So
Thank you.
I hope it's not high. I hope it's,
Yeah.
Well, he's guaranteeing he'll make up the difference.
yeah, he's guaranteeing it. Yeah.
Certainly, it's something I think we all need to discuss and consider. There's always a new way to do things.
Yeah,
and,
I agree.
this could be advantageous, but we will continue to consider it.
Yeah, it's also done through Sourcewell, which is a cooperative competitive bid
Yep.
contract. That's an approved source for us to purchase based on our procurement policy.
Okay.
Otherwise, I think this would probably have to go out to bid.
Yeah.
You know, it's a big number. But if we can piggyback onto a current Sourcewell contract, then I think we'd be fine.
Okay.
Great.
Any further questions, or?
No, thank you very much
No.
for your time, and
Connor, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Connor.
Absolutely. You guys have a great night.
Have a good night.
And-
Yes, I'd like to request an executive session.
a short executive session.
Pursuant to Public Officers Law, Section 105, Subdivision 1, Subdivision D, to discuss current litigation.
So I will make that motion.
Second.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Aye. Good night and thank you.